Everybody, welcome to week 292. That means only 8 weeks away. April 23rd. Be there, be square. We're going to do this thing live from the Hamilton in the karaoke lounge. Oh man, is that fun? It is so much fun to have a bunch of people together and just like riff and talk about topics that are of interest to you. And so speaking of that, here's the big question. What constitutes a good bonus? Oh, well, everybody's got an idea about that, and we got the Kevin Monaghan, the one and only Kevin Monaghan. You guys have had him on here before, and his insights are always so interesting and sometimes counterintuitive. Correct?
Correct.
So
Sometimes, most times.
it's so good to have you on here, Kevin. And Adam is calling from our Greenville, South Carolina office. So hopefully it's not as ducky in Greenville as it is here in Charlotte because it's rainy and cool. Reminds me of Cleveland. Only Cleveland's colder. But other than that, oh man. Well, so Adam, before we launch into what constitutes a good bonus and we get Kevin to jump into the fray with us, there are some changes that have been going on in the last week or so that we probably ought to hit that affect business owners and things that are on their mind beyond what constitutes a good bonus. So let's go ahead and jump into some of that. And then you all know the drill. Hit us up with questions in the Q&A, harass us in the chat, or if you're Papa Joe, you're just going to hit us with questions in the chat, and we're okay with that. So,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, hey, obviously the big change was the Supreme Court decision on uh, one set of tariffs that the Trump administration had imposed. And, it not entirely unexpected that this was going to be the outcome based on, kind of the tea leaf reading from the line of questioning that came from the the judges in the first place. So, this was somewhat anticipatory. So I think, kind of the outstanding questions are really going to be around, okay, the new tariff that just got slapped on, what's going to happen with that? I think Adam's opinion would be, I don't see how they're going to renew it because there's not congressional consent to, or I doubt that it'll make it through Congress to go ahead and renew it beyond the 120 days or whatever that it's legally allowed to stay in place for now. And then I think and in terms of the question of refunds, I don't I don't see how they can get away with not doing the refund. So, the question is, how do I actually get the refund in the first place? I don't know. What I would say is like I don't see like I think Illinois sued the government over the refund. I didn't read the merits of the case to see like was that just on behalf of its citizens having to pay higher prices, or was the state of Illinois actually harmed by a tariff? I wouldn't see that going anywhere because it seemed like it would flow back to the business, not the end consumer that paid it at some level, because the business was the one is the payer on record. That'd be sort of like, you know, I got overtaxed, so I overtaxed, and then I charged Kevin more for the lawn service. Like Kevin's not getting the refund in that case. I'm getting the refund as the taxpayer record. So that's how I think this will ultimately flow. I think on the subject of tariffs themselves, if I could have a little liberty, Gary, and you can help me
you,
not get
you're gonna take it anyway, so go for
okay.
it.
Well, I think you know I think the administration has been this is an opinion shared by others, but it's also Adam's opinion, is that the administration's been too scatterbrained in its position on tariffs between like, oh, it's all about, you know, national security and specifically the drug trade, you know, no, it's all about, level competition and playing field. No, it's all about bringing manufacturing jobs, back on shore. At the end of the day, like the statement of tariffs will replace the income tax is not compatible with bringing jobs back home because that, like, if I brought all the jobs back home and I didn't have to buy anything from overseas, there would be no tariff, right? So, like, in other words, it's just not. The argument sort of breaks down at some level and becomes disingenuous. All of that said, whether this is just again Adam's opinion, whether you believe or not. So in other words, I just wanted to dispel the nonsense that it could ever replace the income tax. But if you believe in tariffs as a tool to level the playing field, I mean that's a hey, that they've been used effectively. Like I can maybe disagree with the negotiation strategy, but they have been used effectively in places. So from that standpoint, it's like I just wish they would get the strategy a little bit better together and communicate a little bit better together, so we can kind of either kind of all get behind like how are we using this, just as a thing. But when I think about like the manufacturing jobs argument, if I was just to use BGW as an example, you know, I have the ability today to um, use offshore labor that is about 50% of the rate of labor that I would pay domestically for the same labor. That doesn't all show up in cost savings, to our P&L and bottom line profit. What it means is that I can absorb some of that gross margin deterioration and not have to increase prices. Is kind of how it shows up for us at BGW. If you got any clients listening in that all of a sudden think that they should get a price cut or are pissed off about the price increase we just did, you're welcome. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. But the but if all of a sudden the administration said tomorrow, and they kind of did in the sense that they put a air quote tax on the H-1B visa program. If all of a sudden the administration said tomorrow, I'm going to charge a tariff on labor that's offshore for CPA firms, I I'm going to have to pass that on to my customer. Ergo, it's a tax. But I think the thing that it's like, hey, can we all just kind of get behind this piece of it is that if I then said, well, I'm actually going to bring the labor back on shore, I'm not going to bring it back in the same way. Like I'm going to use AI, so the way that would show up here would be that if I had 3 jobs overseas, I may only bring 1 back, and that's the thing that's going to be checking the checkers. So I think that's what we're kind of seeing in the manufacturing space is that it's not a 1-for-1 job creation. Most of the people that are brought manufacturing back onshore have done it in a somewhat automated fashion where they've replaced a lot of the human effort that went into it offshore, just because that's the only way that they can make it work financially. So it didn't have a 1-to-1 job creation impact. So again, my only point of bringing this up is just like, hey, let's just all be honest with what the outcome
Yeah.
is probably going to be. And so with that in mind, I'll shut up and get flamed.
Well, no, I mean, it's a voice of reason. I'm on the board of a manufacturing company that's also a distributor, and some of their parts come in from China and other places, and they've had to pass along the tariff thing. So, I could see a situation where those tariffs got passed along as price increases because of that, because they're like, we can't absorb these things. And at the same time, like, well, then the end recipient, the because it's a B2B play, why would they go, hey, uh, yeah, you guys get the double dip because that in effect is what happens if like this is going to be an administrative hairball, man. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how in the world they're going to do it, but okay, well, I I paid as another manufacturer that's using these components. I paid more because of these tariffs. So you pass those things along to me. Why wouldn't I get it? And then you could say, well, what about the business buying the heavy equipment that's buying it, for
Yeah.
to a mine? Why wouldn't they go, hey, wait a minute, you know, what about us? We're the ones that paid. Like, that's just one little instance, So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a freaking hairball. So,
Yep.
anyway, and we can scream at the wind all we want. It's going to keep blowing. So, I don't know, we could get all wound up around the
Yeah.
axles about it. And like, is it going to change anything? I mean, I don't know. But let's talk about the stuff that we can influence, that we can impact our attitudes and our efforts. And, we've probably come off of end of year bonuses. We're maybe looking at mid year bonuses coming up, depending on your fiscal cycle and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's worth going into, like, again, let's talk about bonuses, but I also want to go deeper into compensation methodologies, because a lot of times, and we've seen this, Adam, where we thought that we were doing the right thing and we were being generous, and all we did was create people that were, well, I thought we should have gotten more. Like, what are you, Scrooge? Like, what? I
Yeah.
don't know. So
Yeah. I'll help tee up Kevin here with I one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and it's actually one of my least favorite questions because there's very few times where I have to pop balloons in a negative way. Like, hey, that's a nice birthday balloon. Let me come in with the pen and pop that and ruin your day.
Yeah.
It's I really want to put together a bonus incentive employee program for my team because I'd really like to see some behavior change. What have you seen that works? And then my answer is nothing.
Yeah.
So,
which Adam statistically is the right answer.
Yeah, and then I run them through the various cycles that they will then experience
Yeah.
of the spiral of demoralization. So what I would say is, I've had the opportunity to see three really great speakers in Vistage. One is a guy that we're going to have, I think sometime in May, is coming back, that talks about how to design process. His name's Derek Maines. He's awesome. But the other two have been associated with compensation. And one of them is Kevin. I don't actually remember the other dude's name, but he had a really great diagram of, like, what I personally believe, which I think is somewhat aligned with Kevin, that until you deal with people's safety and economic insecurity, like, everything else is sort of a waste of time from a conversational level. And then anything that you do from an incentive structure is really more situational based on the role, meaning, like, people that roles that are generally inclined for variable compensation, this is usually the percentage that works. If you try to implement a variable compensation structure on something that historically doesn't have a lot of variable compensation structure, that's where you're going to
Yeah.
completely fall apart and probably not get the result you want. So I'm also looking forward to the refresher from Kevin, because it's like bonuses are sort of like having a kid. Like, after I go through that round of trying to explain the program, implement it in the first year, not get the result that I'm looking for, I'm like, never again. and then like 2 years later, like, oh, I'd like to have a little baby, like
Yeah, you got to do
swaddle and
something.
cuddle. Yeah, next thing you know, we're either having a baby or having a puppy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, if you could enlighten us with some of your wisdom, just free riffing, that'd be great. I don't really have I don't really have a overarching beginning question other than maybe like, hey, walk us through the insanity of how all this crap started in the first place. Cause I always think you always do a really good job of walking through like, history, psychology, all that kind of stuff and arriving at this.
Yeah. So the first instinct, Adam, that you're coming on into wisdom, which is, and I would argue, and I don't know how old you are. I don't want to.
52.
52. Okay. Um, what's very interesting in speaking in front of business owners for so many years is business owners who are under the age of 50 tend to cycle. We can do this, the bonus, the bonus, the bonus, and there's a very specific reason for that, which we'll get into it. And by the time they get over 50, they start adjusting this attitude of, let's not even try. It never worked in the first, And so we can see that in the data.
Hey, fun side note from a parenting perspective, gentle parenting probably doesn't work either.
Yeah. But your instincts to communicate that there is nothing that work align with the data and the institutions that many business owners would swear by, which is that incentives don't work. And Adam, my favorite, and here's a great resource for you, a TED Talk by Daniel Pink, who is the author of Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, gave a TED Talk in the early 2000s, and today it's still in the top 10 viewed. So it's had longevity, but he talks about the fact that incentives wears two crowns. One, it's the most conclusive data we have of any topic, of any subject, that incentives don't work. And the second crown that it wears is it's the most ignored data. And so he's, the quote is, there's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And to your point on some of the psychology, Adam, the problem with a lot of people is they want to win with their teams. And when I say people, I mean leaders. And the mechanism we tend to want to use is money, which is the worst leadership tool you can pull from your arsenal. But we do it over and over and over because it makes sense to our rational brain. If this happens, then of course I would share some with the people that made it happen. And the bigger problem is, particularly in well-run companies, which you're used to advising and surrounding yourself with, is that they start to feel this sense of safety and security and camaraderie. And of course, then you want that 1-2 punch of how do we do this with the money as well. And it's very difficult because the mechanisms to use are counterintuitive. And so let's dive into what makes a great bonus, just so people can understand why most incentives just are not a good use of time, what would constitute a good use of an incentive, and who would count a good use of incentive. Let's start with some fun data. If you were to take a look at the world's most perfect amount of variable pay, this could be an incentive, a bonus, what have you, the answer would be 8%. So if you were going to pay a bonus, the world's perfect bonus is 8%. And surprisingly, it has nothing to do with performance of the organization. The world figured this out, what the US data took a long time to figure out. They call it a 13th month, right? 8% is about 1/12 of a person's salary. And it turns out that this was they came to this number because it was actually an investment in the character of your employee, not a reward for an activity of the employee. And what that means is that extra month, what it did for the employees was it allowed them to, which employees will do, have their standard of living absorbed up to their salary. But then it's really hard to do things like one-off purchases, a down payment for a new car, a new computer, new tires. So The mechanism of why 8% works so well is because it's actually a budgeting tool that you as a leader are imposing on your people rather than a reward for doing great. And so, Adam, you talked before, there are some people who shouldn't be bonused. An 8% consistent bonus as a budgeting tool bonus rather than a reward bonus can be more impactful.
Hmm.
Budgeting tool, and I let me see if I interpret what you mean. It's like
For the business and the
yeah. Instead of me saying, hey, this is really, like if we have a really great year, we're going to have a bonus program. You're just saying, like, look, dude, the way that we roll is everybody's going to get 8%, at the end of the year, you
yep.
know?
And that would be if you want to take a look at maybe studying some of this data, you can pull Progressive Auto. They have a program called gain sharing. They have to file it publicly with the SEC, so you can pull it, and you'll see that they have like a little waiting period for new employees, but very quickly people get up to an 8 to 20% bonus, and then their executive teams can get up to 60%, like in the C-suite. But
Yep.
what's instructive here is I called a bunch of their employees and asked them about the program. Nobody really knew how it was calculated. They were told, don't talk about it. We don't know either to their management teams, but it works. And they have 50,000 employees, of which a third of them have been there over 10 years. And when you call and ask them about it, they love it. Now, there's some flaws to it, right? I would say their biggest flaw is one of their core values is profits. And if you've ever had to work with them or you ask any attorney dealing with progressive, there is some downside to that strategy.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about some of the elements to try to avoid that. But the main point here, Adam, is, an incentive that invests in the character of the employee. You would have to figure out how it's going to work into your strategy. Maybe you do it with new hires and try to build it in over COLAs and whatever it is on the internal side of things. But externally, it means a lot to the employees who can help budget their life better. Because if you paid an ad hoc bonus, per se, of 8% one year, today's bonus is tomorrow's expectation.
Yeah.
So do you know how many times, if you paid a bonus, they will go out and put that expense into their lifestyle by buying a new car that they then need that bonus for next year to be able to continue to afford it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, Kevin, what's the difference between like I actually paid the bonus versus hey, it's just part of your salary. Congratulations. I'm assuming that like there is some element of company performance, but it's more like, hey, something would have to go pretty wrong,
What,
to not pay it.
how I would word that, Adam, if I was to run an effective bonus, and I would say
Yeah.
the only reason to run a bonus would be a budgeting character and seen as a character investment rather than a performance invested, would be to
Yep.
put the performance bonus on top of that up to maybe kind of like Progressive, maybe another month or two equivalent max. So maybe 8 to 24%.
Yeah.
Anything more than that, and would be statistically considered too much. Most of those dollars above that amount are going to go to the person's ego, and it's the wrong emotion to try and pander to, if you will, as a leader. Let's look at another aspect of this, Adam, as well. There are instances, very short term. So if you were going to construct a bonus to do something, it should be a very short term organizational shift or department shift, person shift that you want to reward. But it should be very short term in nature and always killed after a year, after like 1 year time frame. And the reason being is any data that you take a look at suggests a bonus has a 6% rate of decay year over year. Another reason to look at it as a budgeting, bonus rather than a incentive bonus is any bonus plan you put out there to try to influence the right behavior, it will be seen as dinging down. Now, to the negative side of like not paying it, we just saw this with American Airlines, right? As American Airlines went through the union strikes everybody was all excited because they put this bonus out where they could make, it was like $10,000 to $15,000 per person. They came in the first year, things weren't going well. They paid $150 kind of on the lower level bonus. And what did you have? You had the Flight Attendants Association and the Pilots Association bypassing the CSO, requesting to meet with the board to throw the CEO under the bus.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that just happened
Run,
here.
yeah. Running the company in the ground. Yeah. I heard about that.
Yep. And so, that's anytime you have a bonus system, the biggest problem, Adam, is as long as you're winning and it's paying, there's no problems. But the
Yeah.
moment you have to disappoint somebody is the moment that you have mutiny risk on your hands.
Yep.
Hey, Kevin, can I interrupt with a question that's come in
Yep.
and just have you riff on this one? But it says, and this is from Robert, he says, in industries where top line growth is celebrated, how do you prevent compensation plans from encouraging revenue that erodes margin or culture? Woo, what a good question,
Yeah.
Robert.
Yep. That's the problem with the revenue game is you start, let me rephrase this. Anytime you put an incentive in place, what you're actually doing is you're taking the employee's mindset and their focus and going in for what's in it for the company and the we to what's in it for the me. And this is where an incentive plan tends to always backfire over the long term is they will do things such as go after revenue that brings in long-term clients that lose them money. We saw this in a very large organization with a $500 to $750 bonus on the line each year for employees that made about $100,000. They were in the marketing team, and they were bringing on customers that had a $200 value at the end of year one. By the time you looked at the end of year two, they were losing the organization money, and none of them wanted to get off of that, wanted to stop doing it or would do anything else because they were just like, we have to get our bonuses. And so here you had a whole department that was bringing on clients that were losing the organization money because they wanted their bonus. And that's the problem with top line incentives is it doesn't matter what the bottom line looks like when the rewards are based on the top line.
Yeah, we saw that in Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
I was going to steal your line, Gary.
Big time.
Yeah.
And then you got, on the other hand, there's probably people who want to then incentivize the bottom line because that's what the business owner really cares about is not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Right.
And, we saw, in addition to what just happened with American Airlines, you can point to, I'm trying to think of if I have a great example. The problem with the profit sharing plan is you have great people and great talent with you, but when it's based on profits, you mix your business decisions and your relationship with money in their pocket. So they may go bring you, this happened to me. I'll use me as an example. We had to put a profit sharing plan in place, and we increased by 52% the top line, and we knew that it was coming in towards the bottom line. But the more money we made the organization, they had to expand, they had to hire people, they had to take out a new. All of this stuff was expensive. So it's a negative seesaw, which is just because the performance went up on one side for the people who can now cite their great year and go, look at what we did. The problem is on the balance sheet of the other side, it caused a lot more risk. It caused a lot more long-term commitments for the business owner. And now when the business owner's like, guys, I can't, this is what the payout is because we had to invest in new equipment, new this, new that. They don't care to hear it.
Right.
And,
yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah, no, I real world example, because we've got, a lot of people have in our client base have read the book, The Great Game of Business, and a lot of the stuff that comes out of Jack Stack, which would say, you gotta, bonuses should be paid off EBITDA effectively. And, at the same time, to Kevin's point, you have to consider the balance sheet investment with that because that's a use of cash, just it is what it is, but full transparency is the way to go. And, you know, and it reads well. Um, and I think I've seen some people have like some short term behavioral changes that have occurred, but like literally what just happened in my own family with one of my relatives that works for a company here in town is that the year prior they had a good year and everybody got basically a travel card for like 4 grand. You know, company had a great year. Here's a travel card for like four. So it's a pretty meaningful thing, like pay for her,
Yeah.
you know, annual vacation. Equivalent year, the next year, everybody got a hat and a t-shirt. And it was literally like, she told me it was literally like, you know, Christmas vacation. Like, okay, well, this is pretty cool, but where'd you hide the gift card? You know?
Yeah. It's not in the hat.
Yeah, and the response was the new office space cost a lot to build out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You know, it's like, so where did that, like, you know, no person ever was on the receiving end of that saying, oh, Gary, you know, I totally understand. You know, of course you have to make investments to more like, I didn't agree to that freaking office space. I don't even work in that office space. Your design tastes are ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
that chair could have been my vacation. Like, did you really need the Herman Miller area on chairs? Like,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, it does.
so
It's
yeah,
upgrading your flights. The owner buys a new Tesla. These are the things we hear. A new Raptor. You get it. They got a beach house. It was all done because they saved that. There was a business decision that they were entitled to. They started a captive this year that siphoned off all the profits. So
Yeah.
let's go back to Jack Stack because Adam, it brings up a lot of great points about Jack's open book management, which I would argue not many people want to run for a lot of the reasons we were just talking about. He also had an ESOP running in the background.
Mhm.
So, you know, an ESOP is a,
Which is funny. You're going to make your own point with this, aren't you?
yeah. So an ESOP is a bit different, right? Like, and this is, if I was to try to outline to the average listener, not that this is easy to do in a private company, like what are the elements at play that work? The emotion you should be going after for your leadership is to instill the concept of delayed gratification into your workforce. And delayed gratification is not, you got this for the end of the year. That's not long enough. And it's one of the hardest things to do because delayed gratification is an unwelcomed guest.
Yeah, I can't buy my new house on.
Yeah.
Kevin said that I'm going to get this deferred comp in 5 years. So can you
Right.
go ahead and underwrite that in the mortgage today? Because I'm really worried about home prices going up and interest rates going up, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Hey, Chapel Hill, can you also defer my tuition bill, you know, until my
Right.
deferred comp kicks?
It is an unwelcome guest. But the point of trying to do it is, and your listeners are probably mostly business leaders. The average person, their thoughts, 93% of them, and this came from David Zerfas at one of your organizational events, 93% of their thoughts are in the past, right? And this is why the annual review is such a dangerous process, because it creates the environment of, I did this. Here's what I did. I did this more than it encourages your employees to throw each other under the bus so that it can stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the Jack Stack just to finish that loop, because this is what Jack Stack did better than anybody, I thought. I saw him speaking at the Vistage, and I thought that this was the most incredible move, and he should have spent the whole time talking about this. Vistage promotes the use of ITR, which so does Jack Stack and the SRC, or whatever the company name is that he runs. What Jack Stack famously did is, because most leaders are looking into the future, not the past, he wanted to get his employees looking the same direction as him, which was to the future. So what Jack would do is he would bring in with his leaders and he would take the ITR report, because the world's always burning somewhere in the future, right? And he would say, look at this shift coming. And he would say, how do we keep everybody employed and keep growing the organization through that shift? And now what it did for the employee was the employee now was grateful that they had a job with this coming. They felt safe and secure. They felt valuable because now they were inputting. But the most important thing it did was it trained the brain to look forward. Right. And then underneath the surface, what he did was he had a great delayed gratification vehicle building in the ESOP. The only time you can disappoint an employee is when they have what I call a big win building in the background. And an ESOP is a tool that does that. It's just not a very good one, but it is one. And we have so few in society today.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Adam, you kind of alluded to it, deferred comp. Even just some type of the nature of that came off with a tone of, oh, and
Yeah.
I see that all the time too. Is nobody likes delayed gratification. It's often complex. Let's just compare it to a ESOP. There's regulatory rules. There's a liability fund. There's all these tax navigating audits. It's brutal to try to create a delayed gratification vehicle because so many people have burned employees in the past that there's a lot of regulation around it. And so it's hard to navigate that effectively.
Yeah. So when
I
I
mean,
guess if you were to think about you're great at citing studies and speakers or anything, if you kind of go back to short term versus long term incentives, are you aware of any study that's actually shown that a short term incentive, meaning like, hey, we're going to pay out a quarterly bonus or we're going to do a blah blah, has actually led to any long like you could even argue that the great game of business bonus structure that he proposes is actually a form of a budgetary bonus,
right.
that just happens to be paid out quarterly. But have you seen any, because they're budgeting it ahead of time,
Yeah. And Adam, yeah. And
and
even
saying like,
then,
if we
yeah.
hit this point, this is what is triggered, so
And every bonus that has worked has the same characteristic.
yeah.
Everybody was involved. It always paid,
Yeah.
even if they didn't hit it.
Yeah.
And and it was usually done as a percentage of payroll.
Yep.
So
So
everybody kind of wherever they were, kind of, that way the top people couldn't be like, you gave me the same as the other people.
yeah. So that's the opposite of like, I need to get the people to start filling out the TPS reports
Yep.
and taking Gary to lunch. Therefore, I'm going to put $1,000 bonus incentive in place. It's like, have you seen anybody like do something? Like anybody had any success anywhere that we're aware of?
Yes. So
Where,
short-term behavioral things, getting people to fill out
yeah,
reports at the end of the day, showing up on time, always work best as sometimes even a cash bonus on the instant it happened, but always work best on a very short runway, 20 days to fix the behavior, get everybody laughing about it, and usually it was the peer pressure. It's, oh, Johnny didn't get his $20, or whatever that is. Those are the type of short-term behavioral that we've seen. Fishbowl incentives. Everybody gets a ticket when they come and there's a prize for a $4,000, but just for like a 1 week thing. Anything longer than that, and people tend to quickly become disgruntled with it. It's a very
yeah,
short-term behavioral fix where incentives tend to work and then kill it. Never let it
Yeah.
yeah,
survive.
yeah. So thanks, Joseph, about the holiday brisket or ham. I think Robert had a good question that
Yeah.
has also been somewhat of a conundrum. So how do
Wait, the
you,
ham thing is actually funny.
yeah,
There's so this is no joke, that stuff works and has a real high equivalent. I don't know the data on ham. I'll have to look at that, but I do know Honey Baked Ham is in business for a reason, and a lot of it has to do with annual ham bonuses. But there is a study that said sending a cake to the spouse on the spouse's birthday has more impact than a $1,500 bonus.
Wow.
yeah,
Now, it's not which do you want, the cake or the bonus. It's just the leaders doing it that is out there. So to whoever made the hand comment, yeah, there's
Yeah,
that stuff goes farther than money sometimes.
that's funny. So the question was, so how do you balance individual incentives with team-based rewards so collaboration is strengthened rather than undermined? It is sort of the big conundrum because like it it's actually funny. My own feeling about that question, Kevin, is that, and I've got some of my own feelings on this. But my own feeling about that question is very similar to, you know, here's the new life hack. I can get, you know, I can get washboard abs in 4 weeks. By doing, and it's like, and again, it always seems to come back to the same answer. You know, patience, time, dedication, discipline, blah 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 blah, right? Yet it doesn't change the fact that I'm like, oh wait, you tell me that there. So I feel like it, in BGW world, the holy grail has always been maybe they'll start self-policing each other.
Yeah.
Um,
The goal
and
is get the money
yeah,
to do the self-policing.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, and I want to use that as a substitute for me having to do the hard work of telling Gary, you suck, you need to change this tomorrow. I'd much rather Gary's peers say that so that I could still be the good guy, right? So like so there's been a part of me that's like, look, I just have to accept that the self-policing or the team policing in some respects is me trying to abdicate, my role as management. Like it also makes me wonder, like, was self-policing even a thing in the 50s? you know,
Yeah.
or the 30s and the 40s? Like, in other words, was Deming when he was teaching the Japanese how to manufacture, talking about team-based goals and self-policing? I don't think he probably was. So that's a long diatribe to say. On the flip side of that, nothing feels worse than when you're the high performer. And by the way, you're not going to get the bonus because Gary let you down.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why is Gary still employed here? I don't get a say in that decision. If you let me have a say in that decision, Gary wouldn't freaking be anymore. Ergo, I would get the bonus.
Yeah.
So
They're not a
react,
team
react,
player, so they need to go.
yeah, react to all that, Kevin.
Yeah, like three things. One is the first person, how do you reward one person over a team? The comparison is the enemy. Let's start there, and then I'm going to go into we want money to do the policing, and then I'm going to compare again to Jack Stack. But there's three real good takeaways in what you just said, Adam. First, let's go to the question that came in on the line, which is how do we reward one person over the team? And this is the problem, particularly in a everybody's going to talk about how much they make world, which is comparison is the enemy. And so you can't like if you gave a $20,000 bonus to one person and not the other people, huge emotional dejection for everybody. I mean, even the person who you gave $20,000 to is still going to go through their own filter of are they greedy, or was that abundant, or was that greedy? And it has nothing to do with the amount. It has a lot more to do with just their subconscious mind and the stories they tell themselves. So you can't control that. the So the hard part, and Adam, you've seen me speak before. It takes me 3 hours to kind of convince people that increasing complexity is the only way to avoid comparison. And so the more complex you can make it, the more people can't understand it, the less easy it is for people to complain about because they don't want to look stupid, or it sounds unattractive because it's so complex. So equity, profit sharing, money, these things are easy to compare. The things that I work in, but this is more delayed gratification tools, they're very complex. So the answer, unfortunately, is not to reward them directly, but to try to create delayed gratification would be the number one answer. Throwing money at them would be the second, and the more you can delay it, with the better, the more impact you'll have.
So,
Particularly with key people, there's one last point here.
yeah.
Once you're over $100,000 with people, each additional dollar of pay is really more taxes are coming out, and the only emotion you're really compensating is their ego. And it's a very negative emotion. And most times, particularly with their key players, people don't realize they're investing in future problems with their key player, not rewarding them.
Yeah.
So sorry, Gary.
Before I make a comment, I want to deal with Joseph's thought. He says, I don't have a large team, but I think salespeople have different bonus expectations as they're paid on results versus operations who do the work in front of them and don't see the financial projections or cost for the term of the client's agreement.
Yeah. They're the hyenas, if you will, right? The lion is the business owner. The hyena,
Yeah,
they need a pet. They can't. They're not. They don't really want to be out on their own. They want to be part of an organization, a company, but they do like to hunt and kill. And
right.
so the hardest part about salespeople is that ego part we talked about. And where you see it manifesting itself is salespeople's secret desire is to become account managers. Just, I have the relationships, I have the power. You need me. I don't really need to I need to do less and less work each year to bring on new clients because I'm reselling the same group over and over. It's a very difficult one. Behind the scenes, every salesperson's secret desire is to stop having to sell, which of course is a business owner's worst nightmare. So again, if it's going to the sales team, the secret is to either pay them very, very well and let them become account managers and focus on bringing in, other sales, or seek to impose delayed gratification. And it's often very hard because you've often compensated their ego for many, many years.
Right. You made a statement that I thought was extremely profound, and citing Dave Zerfos, huge fan. Hope, hey there, Dave. But 93% of the thoughts are in the past, but leaders are focused on the future, and the key is getting everyone to look forward into the future. You've talked a lot about the emotional bent. And I remember at bizjournals.com when I was running that, our chairman had come from Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, very, very smart guy. And we used Gallup for our benchmarking every year. And the number one thing from those Gallup surveys was like the telling thing was, I have a close friend here in the
Yeah.
workplace. That's an emotional thing. It has nothing to do with money. Now, yeah, you've got to have your basic needs met and you have to feel like I'm not working for slave labor wages. But I know that for me, I've made a lot more money in other places, and I could make more money in certain things. But for me, the alignment with the people and the purpose and my own freedom to be who I am is worth way more to me than the money.
Right.
I mean, way more. And so even when we did our deal with Ascend as partners, it's massive delayed gratification, and we kind of chose it that way because we like actually building stuff.
Right.
Like we're so focused on the future, and it's really not about the big payout, but
Right.
it's about having everybody win.
Right.
And to Adam's credit, he made sure that we brought in a number of non-partners who are now equity owners because of this deal. Most people in our industry would go, mine.
Right.
um, but that's not how we like to live. That's not how we want to operate. And for me, um, I think you kind of nailed it, which is, can we focus on something about the joy of building something together? Because that's fun. How many times have we met people that like got the big payday? I could cite a bunch of them with like big companies where they got more money than they could ever spend, and they go into a deep depression, and in some cases either commit suicide or contemplate it. Well, it was never about the money.
Right.
It still comes down to purpose.
Yes. Pay is far more emotional than we think. In my line of work, I would say 95% of what we do is dealing with the emotion of the person. The money only comes in the last second, and it only confirms all the emotions that are at play. And what you did, Gary, what you described is probably, right in line with the elements of creating a big win. The first element has to be 5 to 10 years down the future. The second element is it has to be big enough to be for the mind to attach to a big win.
Yeah.
And then the third element is it really has to be in a four. I use 5 to 10. It can be up to 15, but 10 to 15 has always got to be electable and optional. But really, the argument can be made years 4 to 10 is the ideal time frame, because if it's anything less, the mind captures it and treats it like an incentive, and you're probably not going to give away enough for it to be a big win. And anything that's further into the future, the mind doesn't attach to. It's too long, which is why so many young people aren't motivated by the 401k. It's too far in the future for them to really care. And the scenario you're describing, that would fall into, it needs an external event to pay out. It's probably in a 4 to 10 year range that you're all pushing towards. And what was the third? And it was
Big enough
probably
to be
big enough to be
substantial.
meaningful to do it. And what winds up happening, Gary, is when you have those elements in a bonus plan, people show up and go, what needs to get done? I mean, it is very common for us in a 2 or 3 year review with people to see that they've lost 40 pounds, to see that they're like, everybody around me is stressed and I'm not. I have more work than ever, and we just go and get it done. And so, I've seen the psychology play out, and it really has a huge impact on people. And I wish I wish there was better vehicles to create it company wide than there is today. And it's just very hard to do. If you ever read the book, and this was done in the 70s, Made in America by Sam Walton. He did it.
Oh.
Helen, in a car ride, Helen found out that he wasn't taking care of all of his employees. And she reamed him out, and he created, and again, he had company publicly traded stock to do this with, but he created, I don't even think it exists today, or I think it became a rabbi trust for employees. But he created this vehicle that had all of those elements, and his truck drivers went from 18 months to 22 years. Many of them cited how impactful it was in their life. And it didn't take a hell of a lot of money, Gary.
Yeah.
But notice what all the employees were doing. They're like, hey, we're driving around these trucks empty. We can be more efficient. And Walmart became the greatest logistics company out there because their employees were looking in the future, and they had that element.
Yeah, it's funny. The only two things that I remember from that book, Kevin, is that story,
Yeah.
and the actual truck driver analogy.
Yeah.
Or, it's not an analogy. It was like a fact, like, because he actually references
feedback. Quotes.
a few people, and then also that he used to fly around in a plane to pick locations.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that was about that was about it, which really resonated with me because the only place to shop in my little town in Blackwell, Oklahoma, was the Walmart. Like, it was the place. It was the place to be.
But here's the funny thing about Sam Walton. I never knew him personally, but our vice chairman, when I was in this private equity firm, was a very early employee of Sam and was pushing a broom in store number 16 or whatever. I don't remember. But he and Sam became good friends, and he was one of Sam's pallbearers when Sam died.
Oh.
So, and he became general counsel and then vice treasurer of Walmart. Wow. Really smart guy. And so he had all these Sam Walton stories. It was just really fun to listen to Randy Laney. But Sam said, we are not buying jets. We are using turboprops. And all of the top brass they were salivating for whenever Sam would die, so they could go out and buy jets. And that's exactly what they did.
And they got rid of and they changed the program. And I'd argue it kind of, as soon as they did that, Amazon came along. But yeah, there's a lot of good. He had a lot of good lessons in motivating people, from the camaraderie to the environment that it creates. It's a real testament to uh, what it took. But he cited that the biggest mistake or regret of his life, outside of, I think, a son, was not realizing that aspect of business earlier.
Wow.
The elements of instilling delayed gratification with your people. He said it was the biggest business regret he ever had, was not
Yeah.
realizing that earlier.
It's interesting because he had kind of this mix, like he would do these Saturday morning stand-ups where they were like rah-rah. It's like
Yeah.
a multi-level marketing thing, like
Yeah.
really, like I wouldn't have enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he did have the long-term thing, which and it was about that, and it was also about a greater purpose, which was, but how are we delivering lower prices for our customers?
Yeah.
Now, having been on the receiving side with like Sherwin-Williams, which was always going through line reviews, man, I'm telling you what, Walmart was ruthless in like you could go out of business doing business with Walmart because they would
Yeah.
just shave you down so badly. Um, I want to get to Robert's comment and question before we wrap this thing up, though. He says, culture for me has become more important than I ever imagined it would be. Amen to that, Robert. I can completely agree. And then he says, if compensation is a signal, what behaviors are most companies unintentionally signaling that they value? Ooh, you've asked some really great questions here, Robert.
Say that again. As it relates to compensation, what
So
signals
if
are they
if
sending?
if compensation is a signal, hey, this is important. What behaviors are most companies unintentionally signaling that they value?
The number one way I look at it is when you put together an individualized incentive, you're you're forcing a team, a person, a department to go from we to me, and that's the toughest thing that I see most leaders do is they want to get the 1-2 punch right. Most great leaders have the culture down. And what they really want to do is also win together with the money, but it's very difficult to do that. And so what they wind up doing is they create something that deposits more money into their accounts, and money is not a good tool to positively, move the culture forward. But I don't know if I answered that fully, Gary. But that would be, is that a signal? The signal going from me to we? I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Well, yeah, I I think you are addressing it. I guess the thing that I look at is management always sets the tone. If they're saying, "Hey, it's we're all in this thing together," and hey, we're gonna have to do shared sacrifice, but then they're going out and buying their third McLaren, and they're talking about their third beach house that they just bought or whatever, and yet everybody else is asked to be shared sacrifice. That's a
Yeah.
conflicting signal. Um,
If you want to test that signal, go to your, however big your company is, it's either you or HR, pull the 401k report and see how many people by the time they're 40 have over $100,000, by the time they're 50 have over $400,000, and it will tell you if your culture is winning together or a guise for extortion for a few.
mm,
And
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That's very interesting, Kevin.
I mean, it's the only way the 401k is a terrible way to measure, but it is the wealth vehicle that most private companies are stuck with. And it's very often the hardest thing I see somebody who's running a great culture, everybody's staying there, and it's actually costing them because they never made enough to save. And in my world, I'm constantly met with people following great leaders, and they get this underlying theme in there that this leader's so great. One day when we take this company from 10 to 20 to 20 to 100, they'll take care of me.
Mm,
And very often I'm in the room when I find out that there was nothing behind the culture, and
mm,
and that's that I see that's the signal to look for. And I don't know if a signal is a, but it's is the culture matching? Are we all winning together or not? That's what to judge your culture's
man.
performance by.
Yeah, I got you. That's a good one. I'm actually now going to go look that up for BGW.
I was going to say we need
Yeah,
to do an
yeah.
evaluation. So I think that's really good. Kevin, as always, man, we sure appreciate your wisdom and insights and just common sense, which plain speak common sense that isn't so common out there. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. We'll put
Thank you,
this
Gary.
up on
Thank
the
you, Tom.
BGW YouTube channel later on this afternoon. And, who knows? Maybe Shoemaker will put it up on theirs as well. Jack will be back in the ring next week, Lord willing.
Yep.
And you also talked a little bit about AI as part of this conversation. That ain't going away. We will be doing a series on making AI work. We've done two already, but I was with Rob Norris, who's been on here, I think, before too, but he's definitely been on the podcast. And he said, and he's always been a very bleeding edge tech guy for 40 years in business. And he goes, man, Gary, I've never seen tech moving this fast. He said in 2 weeks, it's like literally in 2 weeks, we're moving faster than we did in years. So something to
I'm
keep our
experiencing that.
finger on the pulse of, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Adam, thanks. Have a safe trip back to Charlotte. Kevin, thank you again. You guys have a good day.
All right. Thank you. See you guys.